My Heroes Are Dead, it's not quite as good as his last project. But it does sound like he didn't miss a beat, even though it's been 7 years. He's 7 years older. Still sounds like he's hungry. So that's good. I hope we could hear some more from him before the next 7 years. But I know even if it does take 7 years and he's in his 50s at that point, I feel like he'll still come correct and he'll still be hungry because of what we've seen from him in the past. It's impressive to hear somebody that has versatile flows as old as he is and as long as he's been around. And I think that comes probably from not dropping an album so much that it's not overexposure. So it's still exciting. It's still monumental whenever he drops these things, as long as more people don't forget about him. On his last album, the beats were a little more adequate and fit his style a little bit more. Not quite on this one, but it's almost there. So it's almost equal to his last album. I'm going to give this one 10 beers out of a 12 pack. One thing about having one track so good, like on this album, is it tends to make you want to skip right to that track every time you put the album on. So it's really hard to absorb the other songs or feel their worth. That being said, this is not a one-hit wonder kind of album. It works as a whole due to Alchemist production and theme, and as somewhat shallow as the theme is, it does tie the album together. So Conway does pull that off. As an LP, I probably wouldn't have been able to take the whole thing, and I would have just listened to Shoot Sideways over and over, but as an EP, it works, and I like it. I give this one a 7 out of a 12 pack. Skyzoo and Dumbo Station worked well together. I think the standout here is the backing group, though. Skyzoo is definitely an introspective, thoughtful MC with good beat selection. I enjoy listening to him, but he's not one of the ones that will be seen as one of the greats or the most innovative. He does stand out for what he's doing among the current popular rap climate, but unfortunately he doesn't stand out among the pool of current underground rappers or other jazz-tinged rappers that came before him. I would rather hear someone like Odyssey, for example. Nevertheless, this is a solid listen and worth it for the music. You don't hear many artists using jazz samples or live jazz instrumentation these days. So I give him kudos for taking that creative step. I give this a 6 out of a 12 pack. It'll get you feeling good, but the feeling will fade quickly. Overall, Bishop's grown quite a bit. I can hear the growth between what he dropped on Nubian Doom and this. I wasn't all that impressed with his last album, Elevators, but this more than makes up for it. And this is his best album to date. I can hear his potential on this, and I want to see him take it even a step further. This kid can rap. He's got a stellar flow. He's got some good lyrics. He's got a good head on his shoulders coming up with concept themes and things like that. While he could have done it a little bit more on this album, this is really his first attempt at that. And I think that it worked, especially for his age and his tenure in the game. He can produce. And now we know he can even sing a little bit. So he's a bit of a jack of all trades, and I think he can use that to his advantage in the future. I'm very anxious to hear what he comes up with because I have high hopes for this kid going forward. The concept on this could have been executed a little bit better, but the whole project was cohesive, and that's something that you don't hear from a lot of rap albums these days. So I'm going to rate Neruvia, My Disregarded Thoughts, as a 9 out of a 12 pack. It'll get you feeling good and you'll be buzzing for a while. So on this album as a whole, every single song is nice. The production's good. The flows are good. The concepts are good. There's some new concepts that we've heard on these. The two rappers are sticking to the same concept, which we don't often hear on group albums. And that all adds to a cohesive, very good, interesting listen. The problem is that there's nothing exceptional here. And that's what makes this like a typical Razzcazz album. Every single Razzcazz album that I've heard is very interesting, very good. There's some good concepts thrown in there. There's some stuff that'll have you hit and repeat for a while, but not for too long. And that's what is the problem. Razzcazz is consistent, but he's never great. And that actually is his consistency, is that he's always good, but never great. There's a limit to him. There's a cap. And unfortunately, he did this to his younger partner, El Gant, on this. and the producer that has made a name for himself on some other things too, J57. But nevertheless, it is a good listen. I like it. I'll listen to it for a month, and I'll probably never return to any of these songs again. I'm going to give it a 7 out of a 12 pack. It'll have you feeling good, but the buzz will fade quickly. Overall, this is a good EP. There's great songs that have a classic jazz rap feel, but with a modern flow and unique perspective throughout the lyrics. It's very evident that he's studied hip-hop's catalog and that he's paying homage to some of the greats that came before him, but not so much, though, that he's copying them or biting their style. He's paying respects, but he is doing his own thing with it. Flow fills the flows nicely with the great piano loops that are throughout and his boom bap drums that he's got all over this thing. And Damu definitely makes this one a standout, cutting up the great vocal samples, and that's something that's missing from modern hip-hop. You don't have a lot of those good record scratches that we used to hear back in the classic era. Damu's bringing that back, and he makes it really apparent on this album. Pino will definitely be on my Songs of the Year list, so watch out for that a little bit later in the year, but this one I feel is something that I can already guarantee will be on that list. But overall, the EP at only 18 minutes, it's over too quick. He could have done more with it, and even as an EP, he still could have extended the good sounds a little bit more. But it seems like Khan is, on his output, he's more focused on what's coming next versus what he is working on right now. Rather than trying to optimize the current project, he's thinking about what he can work on next. So I know that's a strategy in the modern era and the way that things are released and the way that you have to continue to produce content to stay relevant. But if you take away that optimization process, it's going to be hard to produce a classic album. Whereas in the past, those things were tinkered with a lot, so artists could come up with the best sounds possible for the output that they were putting out in their most creative eras. All that being said, I'm going to give this a 7 out of a 12 pack, but I could see if it had a couple more songs and extending the songs that really worked on this could have been a 9 or higher. So it's a little bit disappointing at a 7, knowing what Khan and Flo Fils could have done with this album in particular. k.a.a.n is so laid back and one of the most positive MCs, rather, one of the most positive people that I've actually heard. And that all comes across on his music. It'll just make you feel good to listen to this album, and it's a welcome distraction from everything else that's going on in the world. Somebody should be making an album that makes you feel good and happy and getting those summer vibes and making you want to sip beers and sit out on the beach, and k.a.a.n's bringing that. Much like he brought with his last album, although this one is even more summery as things go and almost even more laid back. But when I heard that style originally on Photo, I kept thinking, how am I enjoying this so much? How is this not monotonous to me because he has the same laid back style? How am I not bored with this? There's no killer flows, there's no hype beats, and the same thing holds true here. But I just kept returning to Photo, and I know I'll keep returning to this because even though he doesn't have those killer flows that are going to blow your mind, he has his own style, and he makes music that makes you smile, and that is more important than anything that'll just get your head nodding. It's incredible how he can make it work and make it not get boring. And like I said, I can't even really explain it, but it all works because k.a.a.n's got it. And that's probably the authenticity that's in him and how good he feels and what he's just putting out there into the world. I was so impressed by his last album, and to me, this is the perfect sequel because it just continues the vibes that we got on that. Although we know that sequels are rarely as good as the original, and that unfortunately is true in this case. This is a great album, but Photo introduced us to the style, and Photo also went a little bit lyrically deeper, and something that you could hit rewind to try to figure out exactly what he meant by certain lines, which isn't as prevalent on everything. Still, k.a.a.n's musical prowess and draw are undeniable. He has extreme musical skill. And everything is something that'll make you smile, it'll make you feel good, it'll make you have good vibes, and that is very important in this day and age. This, everything, is a contender for Album of the Year. So I'm going to give this a 10 out of a 12 pack. I enjoyed it, and I suggest you go and listen to everything and play it on the beach, sipping one of these. Connor's energy and enthusiasm are on full display on this album, and they're never in doubt. While that is something that can make individual tracks interesting, as a whole, it makes this album very monotonous. He tends to have one speed and one flow, one tempo throughout the whole thing. While there are certain attempts to try to change it up, those mostly fall flat and seem to fall outside of his wheelhouse. What makes it even worse is he tries to display this lyrical deep persona. He has these concepts that you think somebody would be going deep on, but he just scratches the surface. He's not really deep enough to fully tackle some of the issues that he's talking about, and I've heard it done much better by other MCs. Individually, a lot of these tracks can stand alone. There are some good tracks on this album, particularly Black and The Cypher. Those are tracks that people could put in a playlist with a bunch of other songs and they would say, hey, John Connor's great. And if this were cut down and were a little bit less bloated and there were just tracks like that and a few of the other standouts, then this album would definitely be above average. But with the monotony and the cheesiness and the bloated timestamp of this album, I am going to rate it a 5 out of a 12 pack. Because you're almost buzzing, but it's just not something that ever gets you there. Overall, Alchemist is a contender for Producer of the Year, and this is probably his best project of the year, which is saying a lot. Freddie is cool, his flows are stellar, his lyrics are on point, and he holds his own over the great production that comes from Alchemist. The guest spots on this are tight and not overused, and it all comes together as a really nice, cohesive project that'll make you want to listen to it again and again and again. It's not quite the phenomenon that Bandana and Pinata were, but still, I know this will be on a lot of people's Album of the Year lists. It'll definitely be towards the top for me. However, I don't think it will make it to the very top for me. Still, it's a great album that'll be in heavy rotation for me for a long time. Several of these songs will be in the top songs of the year. And again, it'll be in my top half of albums of the year, but probably not the first one, which I hope isn't a disappointment for somebody like Freddie Gibbs and what we've come to expect from him. All that being said, I'm going to give this an 8 out of a 12 pack. It's a great album that'll get you buzzing and it'll keep you buzzing for a while. Con is almost there. He chooses to work with just one producer unit per project, which makes for a very cohesive listen. He has so many different styles that you never get bored, and you always appreciate his versatility and his flows and everything that he can do with his words on a song. Each track being something different. And it's somewhat unparalleled in his variety of flows. You don't hear that variety in too many artists. And also, he can sing and harmonize. I really feel like he's a rapper on the cusp of something great, that he could do something monumental. I really feel that he could get the respect like Kendrick Lamar has. However, somebody like k.a.a.n spends a lot of time in their projects and they spend a lot of time listening to their own stuff, optimizing, making changes, perfecting, and absorbing their own concept of the album. And that's what's missing from Con. He releases a little bit too quickly, so there's no optimization. So he can't have that classic kind of album that k.a.a.n has put out. It is amazing what he can do given how quickly he releases it. There's so much potential there that you could see him producing many classic albums to come if he would just spend some time in between projects. That being said, I really want to give him a 12 someday because he has the talent and his talent is on full display here. However, it's just not the classic that I know that he can produce if he spends some time with his album. So I'm going to give Blissful Awareness an 8 out of a 12 pack. It'll get you buzzing, but if you had just a little bit more, you'd be buzzing for longer. Thank you for watching Brews and Reviews. Go ahead and click this video that's next to me if you want to see more rap and hip hop album reviews. Hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.